Really loving all this interaction and some really great information. Let's go ahead and introduce Laura Eisenhower. Laura is a global alchemist and cosmic mythologist and is the great-granddaughter of President Dwight David Eisenhower. She is an internationally acclaimed speaker who has presented her work worldwide. She is considered by many to be one of North America's leading researchers on health, exopolitics, alchemy, metaphysics, and ancient history. In addition, Laura holds degrees and certifications in science, wilderness expedition leadership, and natural healing. For 15 years, Laura has been providing readings with the assistance of many divination tools and astrology. Laura also shares about her attempted recruitment to go to a colony on Mars that represented a timeline that she refused to go along with. She's been able to uncover some necessary truths and agendas about humanity, or that humanity is being kept in the dark about. Laura works to free us from the 3D holographic time loop and guide us back to the pleroma, the totality of divine powers. With great passion and courage, she is helping to return sacred union, divine wisdom, and the many faces of the goddess that have been buried and forgotten for thousands of years. It's always a distinct pleasure to introduce you, Laura. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here with all of you. Just to go a little bit into my background, obviously, being raised in this family has been an interesting thing because there's just a lot there that happened in Eisenhower's administration that we don't hear about, and actually things that weren't discussed in the family. Went to a lot of different family events, have been, very much a participant in the family, and as far as, holidays and just, being a very active member of the family, none of this was discussed. Things connected to Mars or extraterrestrials or UFOs, and but the rumors have been there, and they've always been something that has caught my eye. I saw some headlines about ET's meeting with Eisenhower in Weekly World magazine, and it started to make me think because from a very young age I knew I had a mission, and it wouldn't leave me alone, and I was almost too young to fully understand it, but it was all I could think about it, it was all I could process, and it had a lot to do with the state of the planet, the imbalance of the masculine and feminine, and the dark agendas that are just really infiltrated within our government structure, religion, and just pretty much everything. And so, of course, as I got older, I saw that more clearly, but energetically, I was extremely sensitive to it. And I got a lot of interesting information and intuitive insights and even some contact from what seemed to be a benevolent ET race concerning timelines and the window period of 2012 and how it represented the opening of the natural stargates and how this was very linked to my path. So not to get into too much about any kind of contact, it was enough to really trigger a whole bunch of stuff. I really started to look at, what timelines are all about and what this window period is all about. It's definitely talked about, prophesized. We hear about it in the Mayan calendar. We hear about it from all sorts of people making predictions. And this is, the time that we really have an opportunity to advance ourselves and expand into higher earth energies and to really come into balance and unification on a level that has to do with our DNA and how it relates to the stargates on the planet, much more so than just everybody being in the same room together, learning to get along. It goes a little bit deeper than that because we have to move away from a lot of the programmings and conditionings that have prevented us from unifying on a level that works. And so this other agenda that was very clear to me had to do with the absolute and total destruction of our natural resources, the total control of humanity, the distortions and programmings of the masculine and feminine, and all the false flags of war and all the conflict throughout thousands of years of history that have made it very difficult for us to look at one another and feel that unity and feel that camaraderie and that sense of purpose about what we need to do as a collective. Relationships are targeted. Sacred union, is targeted in the sense that it's already targeted within us. There's a lot of imbalance within our own nature, which makes it very difficult to create that outside of ourselves. And so with that and the need for unification being what's most crucial and what's most attacked, we really need to pay attention to all this. And so being in the Eisenhower family and seeing the trees with ETs, you can't help but think, okay, well, this is connected to one of these timelines and that there's deals being made or something's happening that is very ancient in our history that has led to this sort of this sort of distinction between what's in front of us. And of course, there's multiple timelines. Some have a lot more to do with our sovereignty and our empowerment and our ability to function as a global society with our universal galactic society. And the other is the secrecy, the hidden agendas, the use and abuse of humanity as far as lies and deceits and taking our tax dollars to pretty much fund black ops projects and all sorts of hidden agendas that we don't have a say about. And that trajectory has a lot also to do with the chemtrails, weather modification, geoengineering, and all the different things that are attempting, which already have and are already doing, controlling nature and creating superstorms and natural disasters. So there's a simulation timeline that appears to be real to people that haven't looked deep enough, and then one that's organic. And the one that's organic seems to be a lot more out of reach for people compared to, the masses who pretty much nod their head at anything the government tells them, which is why we have TSA in the airports that people more than happily walk through without question. It wasn't until 9/11 that the doors or the window or everything really got blown open. And so now is an opportunity to really understand. And so everything about all this has been my process throughout my whole life. I've always connected with Ike. He was always with me as a child, and I was always thinking, who is this man that just keeps showing up? I know he's a family member, but, there's something really here that's grabbing me on a soul level and taking me on this journey into something so vast that I eventually had to almost live a double life. I couldn't communicate it to anybody. Everything I was sensing and feeling, all the different sensitivities and pain and anguish I was going through as well. Not just, because of the state of the planet, but I was also targeted. I was pre-identified in Project Pegasus that Andrew has talked about in 1972 before I was born. I'm sure, he has more solid information about that to share, but the whole point is pretty much from day one, or even before that, there's been attention on me to steer me towards going off planet and going down this timeline that represents Alternative 3 agenda and what seems to be a New World Order agenda. It probably didn't start off that way, which we're learning more about from, folks like Randy, Captain K, same person, and just, Andrew Bishago and Alfred Weber and everybody we have here that is working real hard on their own missions as we come together and connect dots. So at some point in my path, because of this targeting, I just couldn't handle being controlled anymore. No matter what I did or tried to attempt to do for my life, there was just something that was knocking me out of my body. There was interferences that were beyond my own comprehension. I used to always kind of take responsibility and say, wow, I must really be out of balance, or something must be really screwed up in me for all these disasters to constantly happen and all these manipulations and all these strange people coming into my life, attacking me and doing all this. I'm like, man, what is going on here? And I knew intuitively that it wasn't coming from me, that there was, and I know that there's a part of me that I needed to strengthen to deflect it, but I knew that there was some sort of outer attack, and that I could use that outer attack to make me strong and to use it as a tool for my empowerment and for my ability to stand in my truth and share what I'm sharing today, rather than let it do what their goal was, which was to get me to do what they wanted me to do. And so I went to a clairvoyant institute, and I kind of stumbled upon it accidentally, and they confirmed to me that indeed I was being targeted by psychotronic weaponry, invisible things that you just can't point out or identify really, and that basically they were trying to control me. And even the visitation I had when I was young, said that, they're going to try and destroy you and take you away. And of course, when you're young, you only have, bits and pieces, but I had a lot of, interesting dreams along the way. And basically, at that point in my life, I was just trying to get my life back. I was very, very involved in trying to understand the nature of reality, being very open to, exopolitics and just, off-planet beings, benevolent beings, and just how we're connected with it, and how we're made of so much more, and we used to, be in a much more higher dimensional DNA capacity that we aren't anymore. And through just feeling the wounds of the planet and just a lot of the suffering on the planet, I let that take me into the zone of what it is we're wanting to call back. What are we trying to recover? Why are we suffering so much? Obviously, we're suffering because something's missing. Well, let's find that missing link instead of be a victim to this and allow it to continue. So when I stopped my life and said I can't stand being controlled anymore, and I said I'm just going to surrender and see where these forces take me, because I couldn't go against that current anymore. It was just too strong, and I knew that I had to contend with it to really get my life back. It wasn't going to go away, and it was manipulating people that were coming into my life. There was, plants that were set up that was confirmed later on that specific people that they had the name of would be put in place in my life with me so that I would be much more easily controlled. And so I gave up, and then all of a sudden I found myself, moving from Santa Rosa, California back to Washington, D.C. in the basement of my mother's house. Always that, great place you go when nothing else is really working out, to get my bearings straight and to figure out what the hell was going on. It wasn't too long after that I just ended up, going to a camping trip, a gathering where there was a lot of other campers, and, it was an event that was going on. And I ran into somebody who, made conversation with me and approached me and was very interested in getting to know me. And, we formed a connection, and then I went back to D.C., and I was visited by this person who was going to secret meetings in Washington and was very sort of hush-hush about it, but was giving me little tidbits, like we're planning to go to Mars, and, you're a part of this, and it's really for your protection. You might not fully understand it, but, basically we need to get off planet because of potential catastrophes and cataclysms and all this different stuff going on. And they brought up, Eisenhower, and they brought up, well, it was this one individual that said, it connects to some things that Eisenhower knew about. I wasn't getting any other conversations than the person that, came to me, but I did hear all the names, of the people he was dealing with. But I was supposed to be very quiet about it because it was still in the works. And immediately, there was just no way I was going to go. I knew that in my heart, because from an early age, I knew I had a very powerful mission, and it was very clear to me what that mission was, and it had everything to do with staying here on Earth, helping people to awaken and to understand what we're made of and what our potential is, particularly during the window period of 2012, when we can, really move into higher Earth energies as the activation of the natural stargates is taking place. Still grounded, still, in our physical embodiments, but upgrading, upgrading into a more conscious level of awareness, and activating our spiritual abilities and all sorts of things. So I knew that there was just no way. And then the conversation sort of got dropped. I think they said, you better not say too much. But there were enough emails I was able to save, and those emails were talking about things like looking glass technologies, something called the Orion's Cube, and a lot about, all the different things that are happening that would lead us to need to go off planet. And the person that approached me to recruit me, that I had a partnership with, basically was telling me that he was getting communication from an off-planet race that was saying that this needed to be done. And so I really started to investigate a lot, and what I sensed that it wasn't even a legitimate ET race, that somehow this was being artificially sent to him, and that the people that were wanting to go to Mars, that had brought him into their circle, were the ones behind creating the abduction or contact scenarios that were giving him the information about going to Mars. And I felt that they were all connected, that this wasn't just some isolated group that he ended up getting in touch with because he had gotten some communication, and he was rallying the troops like the physicists and these different people that had alien technology, because they're a faction of MJ-12, so I can't imagine that he would just call upon them. What I sensed is that they pulled him in, and because he was getting communications about going to Mars, they were curious, and then they were getting his downloads, and then they were sort of answering to it, while in my eyes they were behind it all along, and they had set it up. And so they were programming him on a patriotic level, convincing him that this was to, really help humanity. And yes, it does make sense that it's important to protect the human genome, but when it becomes an agenda that compromises most of humanity and benefits only some and not others, and keeps technologies that could help the planet from being available, and a whole list of other things that are absolutely and totally unethical, it just, the more I found out, the more shocking it got. And no matter how positively presented it was, my intuition took me in a journey that helped me to uncover what was really going on. I had prophetic dreams, and it didn't happen until after I moved to North Carolina to be with this partner. And the reason that happened was because the whole topic got dropped, and it was sort of like, oh, not a big deal. Maybe it's some future plan, because we are going to go off planet. And we have, NASA and the shuttle to the moon, and I knew that that was kind of a facade, but it wasn't so heavy anymore. And I thought that this wasn't as deep of an agenda as I eventually found out. And like I said, along the way I was finding out as much as I could, but it was usually after the topic came up again. So by the time I had gotten a grip on it, I was already moved in with this person, and I had a dream that I was being taken up into a ship by chains, and a voice from the sky said, you know, they'll basically control you and use you, and you have a choice right now to do your mission or to go with them. And there was more to it than that, but I obviously chose to stay here, and I fell out of the ship, landed in the water. I could feel the coldness of the water. It was extremely lucid. And then I wanted to fly back up to the ship and grab whoever else, and then there was lightning and thunder, and there was nothing I could do. I landed in the water, and then there was a planetary alignment, the sky filled with light, and the indication was, you know, you had made the right choice. I had made the right choice. And then I woke up, and I had to go about, you know, pulling myself out of this situation because it just got more and more dramatic all the time. Every time he wanted to share something with me, because after I shared that dream, he knew I was onto them. So every time he would give himself the opportunity to give me insights into what was going on, he had to pull apart the computer systems, all the batteries, the cell phone batteries, and all electronics, because we were basically being monitored. And he would tell me what he knew and why I was recruited and what this was really about. And he said, you know, they want you to reseed a new civilization on Mars, and they know about your kids, they know all about your past lives, they know everything through this looking glass technology, and you've been, you know, chosen or whatever. And then all of a sudden he would get a phone call, and he would get some sort of code over the phone, and he would disappear and be on missions and hardly remember, and then deny everything that he said. So it just got really, really dramatic. The more I resisted going, the more intense and dangerous it got. And the topics would only come up about going to Mars every time I felt, you know, somewhat settled and felt that, you know, I was going to be able to complete my mission, and they might actually listen to me and give me a voice and have me, you know, have a say about going off planet and what we can do here on this Earth to have the best of both worlds, which is diplomacy with the beings on Mars or whatever's going on Mars, or some sort of awareness about it that we could share with the human race. I didn't know the stuff that I'm learning now, you know, that Randy and Andrew are talking about. At the time, there was no Project Camelot, and I didn't know them, but I sensed that, you know, there is at least a colony. So the part about races being there in the diplomacy, it came much later after, you know, collaborating with these folks and talking with them, knowing a lot more about the picture, and that started in 2010. And I knew there was beings there, and I knew diplomacy was important, but I really needed to understand, you know, those that had been there and what their stories were to even know where we could even begin the conversation. But anyway, it was all sort of floating around, knowing that, you know, there can be a win-win situation. Something good can come out of this. I was absolutely silenced. I never had a voice. There was nothing I could do. I got nothing but attacked, and it was difficult to survive. You know, I don't need to go into all that because we all have our stories about what those targets are like. But I eventually decided to talk on the phone about it, and a friend of mine who is a witness to all this, who spoke in Examiner.com, which you can read about on exopolitics.com, you know, is a testimony to this, because I shared with her, and she ended up getting brought into it, you know, was curious about it and interested. And then when I refused to go, I voiced it on the phone, and I could tell that the phones were being tapped. And once I declared it and found my space from the attacks and moved away from the house that I was with, was living with him, the attacks started to subside. And then in 2010, that's when I did the article with Alfred, and the attacks got a little bit less, but they still continue. They still continue all the time. But there's a lot more safety in sharing this information and having transparency than trying to manage it in the background. So the times we are in right now really involve the importance of bringing this information out there. It's not just talking about the fact that there's life on Mars. It's really about preserving the sovereignty of the human race and getting things on track here on Mother Earth and having our priorities set. And this is what I love about this panel, because they all have a similar vision. And we want to, you know, pretty much take the reins and maybe do this right and do this out of respect for, you know, everybody involved that has a heart in the right place, and to call out all the ones that, you know, have chosen, you know, service to self or unethical behaviors and abuses and traumas for the sake of benefiting at the cost of everybody else's freedom. And this is where we are today. And, you know, it's going to be interesting how it plays out, but I'm just grateful that I was able to get away from it, and I'm grateful that I had this family background to give me that extra strength, and I know that that is also why I was recruited. But I was recruited to be a permanent colonist, so my piece of the story is that I back up what both Captain K and Andrew Bishago are saying, even though I don't feel like I even need to because they're brilliant and they're articulate and they're intelligent, and how can anybody really doubt it? But my part of the story is that there was a reason I was going to be a permanent colonist. It connects to the balancing that needs to take place with the masculine and feminine here on Mother Earth. I work with the earth energies, the cosmic energies, in a very multidimensional way, working to clear the wormholes and stargates from all that has clogged them up, that is trying to prevent us from taking this leap into a higher earth energies, and that's my part in it. And to say that if they've gone through all this and I got recruited to go to Mars to be a permanent colonist, then I can pretty much safely say, on top of other whistleblowers like Michael Ralph, that this is the truth and this is Alternative 3, and it's time for us to all look at it and step up in our own lives, figure out our purpose, and empower what needs to be empowered so that we can have a positive future and heal this planet and heal ourselves.